I do think there have to be consequences for abject war crimes. If you're doing something that is just completely unlawful and ruthless, then there is a consequence for that. That's why the military said it won't follow unlawful orders from their commander-in-chief. There's a standard, there's an ethos, there's a belief that we are above what so many things that our enemies or others would do.
So that was Pete Hegseth in 2016 giving a speech at a Liberty conference, basically echoing the exact same message that the seditious six so-called Democrats that came out a couple of weeks ago and put out that message saying, look, if you're in the armed forces, if you're in the military, you do not have to follow illegal orders. In fact, you are supposed to disobey unlawful illegal orders. That was the message there. We hear the same exact message from the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, from 9 years ago. Yet this is the same message that the Democratic lawmakers and former military officers were under threat by our president, threat of hanging, threat of sedition, threat of the death penalty. Mike, make it make sense. Why does Hegseth get to say these things and it's lawful and that's the way it should be, but when Democrats say it, they deserve to be hanged?
Well, unfortunately, I don't think I can make it make sense because it doesn't. This is yet again more hypocrisy coming out of this administration. And, we've mentioned this before, but, rejecting unlawful orders is the correct thing to do. It's even in the Pentagon's war manual. So service members are already trained to reject illegal orders. So when Hegseth said this in 2016, he wasn't wrong for saying it back then. He was right. But what's weird is that he's flipped the script now. And now he's saying that, oh, these people are seditious and they're traitors.
Yeah, the level of projection that is being displayed by this administration it's insane in some ways, because the Democratic lawmakers that released this video a couple of weeks ago, they did it just before these reports of Hegseth giving the second double tap, the second strike on the alleged survivors of the first strike, which is totally against the rules, totally mentioned in the war manual, as you mentioned, that it's not lawful to do that. Could be facing war crimes or worse, murder charges as we speak. And it just shows you the level of projection that Trump goes after the Democrats for saying, hey, don't say these things. Then Hegseth gets in boiling water over something directly related to that. Like, the timing of these things could not be more on a storyline that it just makes the head explode. It just catches the breath of like the level of projection. I just want to highlight that fact, because I don't think people the news cycle these days is going so fast. People don't have much time to keep up with things. I don't think most Americans watching, most people around the world that are paying attention, have the time to even ingest the level of hypocrisy and projection that's going on with what's going on with the timing of these things.
Right. And it's not only here with Hegseth, but another big form of projection going on at the moment too is this pardon for Hernandez, the Honduran ex-president. So that's a case of, hey, we want to fight drugs and kill drug traffickers, but then we're also going to pardon drug traffickers and work with them and say like, hey, it was a setup by Biden or whatever. Like, it makes zero sense. So again, going back to your question, or rather your statement of make it make sense, like, I can't.
Well, let's see if Mark Kelly can make a little sense out of this, because he responded to the clip that was just played. Let's take a listen.
Senator, what do you think of that?
Well, Aaron, I think he's correct, and it's exactly what we said. But when we said it, Pete Hegseth now, said 8 years later, or 9 years later, he says what we said was false and reckless. And I think it begs the question, what has changed? And it's pretty obvious what has changed is we have an unqualified Secretary of Defense who only cares about sucking up to this president and loyalty to this president. That's the difference. It's who's commander-in-chief. What we said was uncontroversial. The White House sort of confirmed that. They said his uncontroversial remarks, they were the same as ours. I mean, this is so ridiculous. And what the president wants to do now is intimidate us. and stop us from talking, which is not consistent with our Constitution. And beyond that, Aaron, he said we should be hanged for what we said, executed for what we said. And what we said was exactly the same thing that Pete Hegseth said in 2016.
Yeah, so now is Trump going to call for the hanging of his own Secretary of Defense? I think not.
Of course not.
We're just dealing with insanity at this point and nonsensicalness. And, you know, the other point is, if there are trials after this, if we do have our Nuremberg trials for, well, all the crimes that this administration has committed, let alone this one that we're looking at right now, that piece of video that we just watched at the beginning of Pete Hegseth, that's probably going to be shown in these trials. I mean, that's he himself admitting that he knows that there's a, quote, ethos, that he knows that there's a rule book, there are laws, there are the war manual explicitly states these things in clear terms. He admits that 9 years ago in 2016, which does not give him much cover for the actions that he's taking now in 2025.
Exactly. And there's also the post that Donald Trump made just a few weeks ago when all this seditious six stuff started, where he actually posted the what's called the loyalty to the Constitution plaque at West Point, which right in the middle of it says, our American Code of Military Obedience requires that should orders and the law ever conflict, our officers must obey the law. So even there, you know, Trump is in theory saying the exact same thing that these, quote, seditious six have said. So again, it's more just gaslighting. It's more projection. It's more, you know, we can get away with it, but you can't. And demonizing, you know, irrational demonizing of the left. And I hope that people aren't falling for it, because it should be pretty clear cut that, you know, Hegseth literally said the exact same thing in 2016. So what are you going to do? You're going to, you know, if you're going to hang Mark Kelly, are you also going to hang Pete Hegseth? Like, I doubt it. So this double standard of justice has been prevalent all throughout Trump's second term, starting with the January 6th rioters being pardoned. And it's just furthering continuing. If you're on his team, if you're on Team Trump, you get a pass. And that's not justice.